Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dairy Raid and another morning walk and talk. Hadn't planned on doing one of these until maybe later in the week, maybe next week after Minnesota, but just by happenstance I glanced in the mailbag folder and there were a couple questions sitting there. So that kind of spurred my interest in doing this. So here we are. Let's get into it with the first question. So the first question obviously came in last week, and if I had seen it, I would have answered it last week, but I didn't. So we're gonna answer it now. And it is, did I see Luke Fickell's press conference on Monday? It would have been last Monday. And what did I think of it? So, with Luke Fickell's press conference, I'm guessing I know what you're asking here is what did I think of him basically blowing up at Colin Bartholomew for asking the question about who's going to be calling plays. So, here's what I think about this. First thing, in my time doing the Dairy Raid, I have gotten to know some of the members of the Badger media, had some really nice conversations with a few of them, and so I respect their opinions, their questions, and I know how difficult of a job it is. And it's a question that has to be asked, but where the issue comes in is not knowing that it's a situation where by giving up who the play caller is, you are giving away game plan information that Nebraska could have used against the Badgers. So Luke Fickell could have answered the question more delicately and more concise without getting angry, but he could easily said, we know who's going to be calling the plays. It's going to be a collaborative effort, but we don't want to give away too much. That's all he would have had to have said. And if the media and the fans didn't agree with it, so be it. He chose to get upset by it. And I'm kind of surprised that he didn't expect it. It seems like he was caught slightly off guard. Maybe he was expecting that the answer was obvious. Maybe he was expecting the question wouldn't be asked because, again, it gives away game planning information. And you can always tell that coaches are very hesitant about giving away game planning information in a press conference. But he shouldn't have been surprised. So I'm not Luke Fickell. I can bet if he had a chance, he'd take it back and say it better. But he wouldn't have changed the facts that came from the answer, in that they didn't want to give away who was calling plays specifically. Because even if it was one guy with the headset, it was a collaborative effort, and you could see it in the play calling. You could see the tight end coaches' influence by there being more tight ends on the field. You could see the wide receiver coaches' input because they ran a lot more simple, less read routes, more run to your spot kind of routes, more RPOs. Okay, you saw the influence of a quarterback coach who was just getting to know his QB, but thinking back to how things were when he played. So you could tell it was a collaborative effort. Just wish Luke Fickell would have said it more eloquently than that. All right, next up, and I've gotten this a few times, and basically they would like me to define the power spread. What sets the power spread apart from other offenses? For one thing, for me, I see the power spread as doing a lot of things that the air raid tries to do from a philosophical point of view, getting the ball in space, getting playmakers in space, stuff like that. But we do it from the opposite point of view, where the air raid tries to do it by spreading out the formation and throwing the ball and stressing the defense horizontally and vertically. The power spread, first thing, it's run-based. You go back to Urban Meyer, who I think is one of the grandfathers or forefathers of this type of offense. And he always preached back when he was at Utah that their offense was 65% run, 35% pass. And to me, that's about right. What sets the power spread apart is they're trying to create space and stress the defense from sideline to sideline with the run game. And then they stress the defense vertically off of the run game, whether it be the vertical passing game, play action, and in the latter years, the RPO, screens, etc. So you're taking a similar concept to the philosophical point of view of where the air raid has gone, and you're applying it to the run game. I have said for years, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, that would have been the easiest way for the Badgers to modernize their offense, is to take that concept and apply it to Badger football. And honestly, I think we've seen that the last 2 years. But with the new coach coming in, we are going to see, and I think you can see it with the signing of Carter Smith, that the QB is a huge portion of the power spread. Not just a mobile QB, but a dual threat, borderline run-first QB. I mean, you saw all those years with Ohio State. I mean, for almost 2 decades now, their offense has been built around a mobile running QB, stressing the defense from sideline to sideline. You get a running back who can who's a slasher, who can create space upfield, okay? If he can be an asset in the passing game, that's even better. And then you play off of that. I think that's the direction that the Badgers are going to go, because it makes the most sense. And it is the closest in terms of ideology to the old school Wisconsin football, without being in a position where defenses can just out-athlete you. And that was always the problem with the Badgers offense back in the day. Is it worked really well against teams that they were overmatched against, but when they came to points where they were out-athleted, both speed and strength, they failed because they didn't have a counteraction, because they didn't stress the defense horizontally and vertically, make them cover the entire field. So that's what I think we're going to see from the power spread, and hopefully that's what we're going to see going forward. The next question I got, and I've gotten this, I think, of the 18 questions sitting in my mailbox right now, about 12 of them are around this general idea: who do I think is going to be the offensive coordinator? Well, I'm not going to say who right now, because I'm actually in the process of preparing a video of potential candidates. But I'll give you a handful off the top of my head in no particular order. Gino Guidugli, Corey Dennis, Brian Hartline, Tom Herman, Jason Eck, Andy Kotelnicki, Mike Denbrook, Cade Bell, Ben Arbuckle, Tyler Rule, and we'll leave it there. A couple other surprise candidates in there. But you can see where my head's at, and I'll make a video breaking down what I think about each of the potential candidates. All right, so next question, and this is more from the defensive point of view, is how the defense is so inconsistent right now. where we have weeks of good showing against really good teams, and then we seem to bottom out against perceived lesser opponents. What is causing this big inconsistency? For me, as always, the root cause is the offense's approach to football and how that affects our defensive line. And I would say the front seven in general, but specifically the offensive line. When the Badgers have played against teams that decide they're just going to run us over and focus power downhill, not worrying about finesse, that's when the Badgers have struggled. Because again, the defensive line, and it's no shock, the defensive line is the weak link of the Badgers' defense. We know that. And so what it's ended up causing is when we play against those teams, they overemphasize hitting us at our weakest spot. And why we've done good, against Penn State and against Oregon, and not done good against Iowa and Nebraska, is even though Penn State and Oregon are better on paper, they're better matchups for our defense. Their offenses are built more on speed. Their offenses are built more on stretching the field sideline to sideline. And with where our interior guys are and our linebackers are, that fits them the best. So therefore, they play the best against them. That just makes sense. And then when you play against the teams like, again, Iowa, and how Nebraska is building their offensive line, that's right now where we're going to struggle. And newsflash, and I'm going to say this, and I want everyone to turn up the volume on their YouTube machines right now and hear this. It would have been the problem regardless of who the defensive coordinator is. For the 4,000th time, okay, the defensive front that the Badgers are running now would be the same one that Jim Leonhard would be running, with arguably the same, or let's face it, slightly worse players, because they wouldn't have recruited us at the same. So the outcome would have been the same. And I argue that we would actually be in worse shape against the speed-based teams, because in the past, those were the teams that Jim Leonhard's defense really struggled against, was teams that could out-athlete us on offense. And now we're showing that at least we're closing that door, or we're closing the gap, between us and the more athletic teams. But when you look at our front 6, 7, whatever you want to call it, it's not a shock that our defensive line in the rotation is a true freshman and a transfer. And our linebacking core is led by a redshirt freshman. Our best defense outside linebacker is a guy that the previous coaching staff basically left for dead. We all did, and Aaron Witt. So stop blaming and start seeing what's actually happening. We play better against teams that we're matched up better against. And right now, that happens to be the better offenses. All right, so next question, and I'm going to lump about 6 or 7 questions over the last few weeks into one. And again, dovetailing off of the defensive discussion that we just had a few seconds ago, and talk a little bit about why the Badgers are in a 2-4 front. A lot, most of the time, whatever you want to say. Okay? Simple football math. For me, and for many coaches who coach defense, less than 2 tight ends on the field, you are in a nickel defense. Less than 2 tight ends usually means you have at least 3 wide receivers on the field, if not 4. And the numbers, and when I say numbers, I'm talking about you take size and speed and quickness all into account. You put those in a calculator and you kind of get your average there. You want to match it defensively. And you do that with a nickel defense. And the nickel defense has become the new base defense. You rarely see now, unless your team is filled with pro-style talent, pro-style defensive personnel packages in base down situations. Okay? If Georgia and Alabama can have outside linebackers who can run all over the field and have the athletic ability of safeties and defensive linemen who have the 40 times of safeties, sure, okay, then you can be in a base defense. But it's all about athletic ability. So it comes down to you putting a defense out there that can match what the other team is doing defensively. And I've had specific questions like, why would you use a 2-4 defense against a team that has a running mobile QB? Well, it's because we want to contain the quarterback. The whole reason why the 2-4 defense came into existence in comparison to the 4-2 is the advent of the more dual threat QB. So you find that hybrid player, that player who's strong enough to set an edge but more athletic enough to chase and spill players to the sideline. And again, this is not new. And I will also emphasize, I can tell a lot of people who are asking these questions have not watched Badger football over the last decade. Because it's the same system that we have been, and I've been saying this the whole time, it's the same system. Okay? The difference being, Mike Tressel is asking his linebackers to do more and, dare I say, do what you would expect a Division I linebacker to be capable of doing. Okay? And that is making their read, fitting their read, and then attacking the football. And that's where the joke of fitball came up, last year with Greg Scruggs, how the previous defense played fitball. Is the Badger defenses in the past would go to their run fits, and then that's it, and hope the ball came to them. Now, the defense is being asked to make their run fits and then find the football. Control their gap and then find the football. Being aggressive instead of passive. Okay? This is an attack defense, not a passive defense. Okay? That's where the disconnect has been happening. And you can see it when you look at guys like Jake Chaney. He is at his best when he sees, chases, and go get. He struggles when he's sitting and trying to find his way in space. He is a fast twitch attack linebacker. He sees, he can go get. Okay, and where he struggles is where he has to think. And I think that's where we got into trouble last year. So that's why you are seeing guys like Christian Allegro fitting in well and doing well because they understand their role and they fit within the personnel that we're using. But it comes down to the fact where this defense is damned if they do, damned if they don't, especially with the fan base. Because, okay, we're in a nickel defense now. Because that's what matches up best against the defensive personnel and also, or the offensive personnel, and it also puts our best defenders on the field. But, okay, for the sake of argument, let's put a base defense out there. Let's put a 3-4 defense out there, which is the Badgers' base pro personnel, 2 tight end, 2 back defense. 2 things are going to happen. 1, we automatically get weaker up front. We get weaker up front because we're putting an extra defensive lineman who has proven that he can't be on the field in base downs all the time. We know this because Luke Fickell and Mike Trussell want to run a 3-3 defense. But we can't put a 3-man front out there because their defensive line is not that good yet. Talent's not there. Okay? And I'll keep saying it. It starts with the upperclassmen. Okay? So that's the first part of the problem. Then, if you go to a 7-man box, what you are going to end up with is essentially cover zero defense, which the Badgers tried to do last year to play more man coverage, single high coverage, in an effort to be able to blitz more and bring more pressure. And we proved last year that outside of Rico and to an extent Nizer Forkarine, we weren't really good at man coverage. And some of you are going to say, well, you can run zone out of 3-4 personnel, and you can, but you're limited. And because you're dropping less into coverage, because again, the reason why we're in a pro set, a 7-man box, is to have extra guys in the box. There are now more holes for the offense to occupy and less people for the defense to cover that space. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. So what you have to do is you have to match the defense to personnel, not the personnel, and then hope the offense fits it. It's you have to fit your best people against what the offense is showing. And with any team, any coaching staff who has a roster makeup that we have, playing in a league that we're playing in, and again, the Big Ten is no longer, we're going to line up in I formation, 2 tight ends, and pound the football. Hasn't been that way for 15 years, but it is especially the case now with bringing in all of the West Coast teams. Now Nebraska's running the air raid. It's going to keep getting worse. So you might as well start changing now and building the roster to combat the offenses, that we're going to play against. Makes sense. Makes sense to me. I know it doesn't make sense to certain people, but you're choosing to let it not make sense. Okay? You're not looking at the obvious. And the obvious is the nickel defense fits the offense that we play against best, and it puts our best 11 people on the field. End of story. And the final question. And I debated whether or not I would leave this question until the off season, but I'll address it now so that I'm on the record, and we'll come back to this in the off season once we see how the coaching staff is made up. And that question is essentially, what is my floor for Luke Fickell? Where is the win-loss record got to go where I'm going to consider firing him? I don't want to put a number on it because the win-loss record could go up and you can still feel like the program's going the wrong direction. So let's look at it this way. Luke Fickell came in and is doing a hard reset of the program. Offensively and defensively, recruiting, infrastructure, everything. Complete reset. And it's the first time that Wisconsin has had a complete reset, I want to say, since Barry Alvarez. Because everybody in between, without maybe a slight exception of when Gary Anderson came in, because we saw an uptick in certain areas when Gary Anderson came in. The program has basically been the same since Barry Alvarez. The only things that change, and okay, I'll say it now so people don't think I'm saying anything positive about Gary Anderson. If it wasn't for Gary Anderson, we'd still have the second worst weight room in the Big Ten. We would have bad player relations, academic relations, programs for the players, and infrastructure, things like that. Those were key things that Gary Anderson wanted when he came in, and he wanted it improved. And to Barry Alvarez's credit, he didn't. Okay? There, I'm done being positive about Gary Anderson. Hold your horses, everybody. All right. So getting back to Luke Fickell. So Luke Fickell is bringing in this first hard reset of the program in 35 years. For me, I will know when things aren't working when I, as a coach, can no longer say, well, it's the guys from the previous coaching staff, or bad fits for the direction of where we're going now. Okay? I can say that now. And while it is an excuse, it is a valid reason why things aren't working. Okay? Because there is still a mismatch between hardware and software. Okay? For good and for bad. So right now, the oldest players on the roster who are contributing are true sophomores, because Ashcraft played enough last year, I believe, to lose his red shirt. So, true sophomores, mostly redshirt freshmen. We currently have 2 redshirt freshmen, or a true freshman, a redshirt freshman. Oh, sorry, 2 true freshmen, and a redshirt freshman on the defensive rotation, and maybe a true sophomore in Allegro. Forget if he played enough games last year. Okay, we have a redshirt freshman starting on the offense, or as a key contributor on the offense. We have a true freshman in the running back rotation. We have a true freshman at left tackle in the rotation when needed. What I'm getting at is the changes that Luke Fickell are making are still 19 and 20 years old. And if Luke Fickell, and I've had this comment too, and you saw in my post that I made on Substack, if you wanted Luke Fickell to go true Dion and get rid of the entire roster and bring in 50 transfers, he could have done that. But talk about an easy way to get the fan base to hate you even more. You guys would have hated that, even if they started winning. So he took what I feel is the correct approach. He told the players, this is what we're doing. This is what I'm about. You're in or you're out. And those who decided to be out were out. Those who decided to be in were in. And he gave everyone a chance these last 2 years to find a role and to fit a role. I think this offseason, this recruiting class, both the high school and the transfer recruiting class, are the most important class that Luke Fickell is going to bring in. Because we've had some major recruiting wins in the high school recruiting these last few weeks, bringing in some major talent and getting major talent away from Michigan, which is the recruiting battles I want to win. I want to beat Michigan in recruiting battles, not Eastern Michigan. So, we're winning those battles. And then this transfer portal class, I think, has got to be huge. Now that there's nothing to worry about with scholarship limits, I think they need to... Chris McIntosh needs to show that he's committed to the football program and spend some goddamn money. And bring in all of the missing pieces. And Luke Fickell needs to be aggressive enough to bring in what he needs right now, not what he needs in 2 years, because he's not going to have 2 years. If the win total goes down this next season, I would not be happy, but I would be okay with Luke Fickell getting fired. 3 years, you at least want to see a leveling out. Do I think we would have had more wins at this point with the previous coaching staff? No, it would be trending in the same direction. And it would continue to trend down. Because nobody in the previous administration thought there was a problem. I do believe the current coaching staff and the administration realize there is an issue. And already in these last few weeks, you have seen a commitment. Why? Because I guarantee you Jalen Williams and Carter Smith were not cheap in the NIL market. And we got them. So that needs to continue. So that's a long way to get back to the original question. Where's my ceiling or my floor? Is when this roster is made up of mostly Luke Fickell players and there is no progress. Then I can't have anybody, nobody can have anybody to blame but Luke Fickell and then the current players. Okay? It's a collaborative effort, and coaches are never going to blame the players, and they shouldn't. But players are the ones who are on the field. And when Luke Fickell has the pieces that he wants, that he specifically brought in, not pieces that he inherited, if then he's still not winning, and there are still the same issues, then maybe it's time to pull the plug. But until then, I want to see the offensive line who's grown up only under A.J. Blazek. I want to see how the new quarterback room looks. I want to see how the kids we recruited to play receiver do, and not the guys we brought in as transfers. I want to see the defense that was specifically recruited to play Luke Fickell's style of defense filling all the spots. And right now, the oldest of them are true sophomores. And it takes a special type of player to play early. And why very rarely, even back in the old days, we would have, very rarely, would we have guys who play young. And usually when they play young, those are the guys who end up being in the NFL. So, does that mean Dylan Johnson and Christian Allegro and Xavier Lucas are NFL bound? Probably. I mean, Luke Fickell has a track record of putting those type of players in the league, so we'll see how it goes. So, I want to see progress next year. I want to see them continuing to win in the recruiting trail, and I want to see them nail this transfer portal class and really clean up, because there are a lot of seniors leaving, so a lot of holes to fill and less restrictions to fill those holes. So we'll see how it goes. All right, I think that's enough for today. This walk and talk looks like it's going to be pretty long, but that's fine. You guys got me good questions, so there we go. I am in the process. One of the reasons why I'm doing this walk and talk is to let some Nebraska videos render so they can be uploaded. So Nebraska videos will come up this week, and next week we got Minnesota, and then hopefully we got a bowl game after that. So thank you for watching. We'll see you then.